Hello, hello, hello. This is Chris Ferdinandi from GoMakeThings.com. It has been way too long since I've released a video, and that's because I've been busy making Kelp, my UI library for people who love HTML, powered by modern CSS and web components. There are so many cool things about this project that I would love to cover in one or more videos, but it's way beyond the scope of a single video. It's going to take a whole bunch of them. There's a bunch of cool stuff I want to dig into. Today, specifically, we're going to be looking at the new way that, or the current way, I guess I should say, that I am structuring my web components for this project. It's a little bit different from how I've done them in some of the videos in the past. It maintains all of the same simplicity, but it makes them a little bit more bulletproof for being used on kind of bigger projects where the environment might not be quite as well known. Like when I build web components for myself, I know I'm going to load them in the footer. I know I'm going to follow certain conventions, but people using like an open project like this might not. They might use it in a CMS where they can't control where the JavaScript loads, for example. So we're going to look into all of that in today's video, how I set them up, different conventions I use, what I recommend for you and your projects. We're going to take a peek. If you're interested in Kelp, you want to learn more about it, head over to kelpui.com. I have some very robust documentation that covers all of the different pieces, all the different components. Just real quick, because I'm super, super proud of this. Kelp is built on an HTML first approach, which means that I use really lightweight CSS. All of the native HTML elements are styled out of the box. You can use semantic utility and component classes to nudge and tweak them in different directions. But if you don't use any classes at all, it still looks good. It still looks cohesive. All of the interactivity is driven by progressively enhanced HTML web components. So, for example, you may or may not be able to see here, if you wanted to make a text area that automatically expands, you include a normal text area, and then you wrap the Kelp auto expand component around it. Now you have an auto expanding text area. And if the JavaScript hasn't loaded, you have a perfectly functional text area. And I think most important in this project is I really wanted folks to be able to customize it with no build step at all. So everything is configurable with CSS variables, HTML attributes, and it uses cascade layers under the hood to make sure things load the way they're supposed to and avoid conflicts with other style sheets you may be loading. And I have a whole bunch of documentation on how to do that. But I did also want to point out that I have this really cool theme builder. So if you wanted to add your own color palette, let's say I wanted to update the color blue that I use, you type in your hex code, it's going to spit out just the stuff that needs to get customized. You can download it or you can copy paste it and drop it in wherever you want. It wraps it in the right CSS layer. It spits out the values that you need to know. And you can even kind of tweak the vibrancy. So if you want to make the color a little bit more muted or a lot more vibrant, you have the ability to do that. You can kind of scale it up or down as needed to build a completely cohesive color palette. And this also walks you through things like setting your primary and secondary colors, what color you want your links and focus styles, what fonts you're using in the project, all configurable with CSS variables. And it's only going to spit out updated code if you've changed something. So got my fonts, got my color palettes. Really cool. In the near future, I'm also going to be building a custom installer. So you can pick the components you want and it'll spit out a custom CSS and JavaScript file for you without you having to run your own build or do anything like that. But for now, since we're still in beta, I recommend just grabbing everything from the CDN and rolling with it. That way you'll always have the latest version of the project. Also worth checking out the license. It's kind of cool. I use a fair code license for this one. So it works just like an open source license that you'd already be familiar with if you're using it for commercial or non-commercial or personal projects. If you're using it for commercial purposes, there is a small per project fee. It is not tied to the number of developers touching it. It's based entirely on revenue. So like if you have a small nonprofit with a bunch of people, but you don't make a lot of money, you're not going to pay as much as a big company that might only have one or two developers working on a thing. So I feel like that's a really fair way to structure these. That's not what we're talking about today. Let's get into the meat of this project. I'm sorry. I am so excited about this. There's a ton of stuff we're going to dig into in the coming weeks. I should have been making these videos all along. Today, we are talking about the current way that I structure my web component code. So let me bump up the font size because this is too small and you're not going to be able to see it. There we go. Cool. So today we are working with the Kelp TOC component. So this is going to generate a table of contents. You can see here I've got, let's again zoom in. I know this stuff looks small. So I've got some headings on this page. I don't have any content here because it's just a demo page. So I've just got some content. And all the H2 headings are being rendered out as a simple inline table of contents. In the HTML, you'll notice some of these elements have IDs, some of them don't. The ones that don't, it is automatically generating a table of contents for them. We'll look at how that works if you're curious. But yeah, the real meat of this is the way I'm currently approaching structuring the web component class in the JavaScript. Just quick aside, by the way, if you like these kinds of videos, if you want to see more of them, or even if you want to support Kelp, the best way to do that right now is with a Go Make Things membership. For as little as $3 a month, you get access to my private Discord community, a bunch of other perks, and most importantly, you help me create more awesome free resources like this. You can learn more over at gomakethings.com/join. It's a really great value, and I would just really, really appreciate it. And no worries if not. The web is for everybody. So if you don't join, that's cool too. I'm just happy to have you here. So yeah, let's take a look at this under the hood. So this one is not progressively enhanced because there's not really a great way to progressively enhance creating a thing that didn't already exist, right? Like the whole point of this is to generate the table of contents. So this is we'll call it a classic web component or a React-y kind of web component in that it starts off as an empty element and you pop it on the page and it generates some stuff for you. If we jump over to the component JavaScript, so one of the first things you may notice is that there's no constructor inside the class for the component. So if you've seen my videos before, you've almost certainly seen me do this, and then somewhere along the lines, I'm setting some properties, right? So set properties, and I'm doing something like this, level equals, and so I'm defining all of my properties, and then I'm running my code, right? So then we'll like build the HTML. So that usually works. And I've even argued before that a lot of that stuff should happen in the constructor. And I stand by a lot of what I said in past videos. Like a lot of the argument that I've always made around this is that when you run your setup code in connected callback, it gets rerun every single time the element gets connected to the DOM. So if you move it in the UI for some reason, like if you just grab an element and append it somewhere else, it's going to rerun all that code. And that's bad. You don't want that. You don't want to be connecting the same event listeners multiple times because they're going to run over and over again. I have a new way in here that I'm approaching that so that doesn't happen. I think for teaching purposes, what I've done in the past is fine. But for a bigger project, I'm putting things in connected callback. And the main reason I'm doing that is I've run into situations where if you try to, say, clone an element or replace an existing element with a copy of itself or move some stuff around, sometimes the browser gets mad and says that because there's child elements, it can't do that. So I'm now running all of that code in connected callback. I will get into what's happening here, but the main thing is I am running an init function that actually handles all of the setting up. The connected callback is just saying like, okay, run the stuff now. If we jump down to the init function, you'll notice the very first thing it does is check for an isReady attribute. This is how I am preventing the code from instantiating over and over again if the element gets moved. If it's already been initialized, it's only going to run this once. You can move it a million times. It's not gonna run again. Once we do that check, I am grabbing my settings. And so one of the nice things about HTML web components is you customize them directly with attributes. So, in a traditional JavaScript kind of world, you would do something like new table of contents. I'm targeting the TOC element, and then these are my settings, right? So like my heading level is going to be, I want to do H3s for this one, right? And the target container I want to generate headings from is main, right? Like that kind of thing. With a web component, you do that all through attributes, which is awesome. So we are getting those attribute values, and if they don't exist, we're setting defaults. So if there's a level attribute, we'll use its property. Otherwise, we're growing with H2. Heading is a property that lets you add some text as like a label. It should probably be called label, but it's not, before the other elements in the table of contents. Target is a target component where you would like to get the headings from. So by default, it'll look on the entire document. But if you wanted to scope that to, say, just the main element or just a subsection on a page, maybe you have multiple tables of contents, you can do that. And finally, the list class to add to the list element that gets generated. So by default, it uses Kelp's list inline layout. So if you were to dig into the documentation, you can see that the list inline class is going to let you create inline lists. Obviously, you can also control the gap and spacing on those. So by default, we're going to use that. But if you wanted to override it in some way, you could do that as well. Next, I actually run the rendering function to generate the table of contents. I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but I have a kind of a new way I'm approaching debugging and throwing errors in Kelp that I don't normally do in my like personal web components, but for a project like this, I am. And then when we're ready, we set the isReady attribute, and we also emit a custom event that developers can hook into. I've talked about these in the past. They're a great way to extend functionality of your components in ways that you won't always plan for as a developer. So the render function, not really, I don't want to dig into the weeds of how this specifically works, but I'm grabbing all of the all of the heading elements based on the settings the user provided. So the target parent and the heading level, creating an array from them, looping through them, spitting out a list item with a link that points to that heading, and then injecting a list of all these elements inside the web component itself. Couple of key things. If there's no heading ID, I'm using the crypto random UUID method to generate a random string, and I'm prefixing it with H_. That way it's always a valid ID, because IDs aren't supposed to start with numbers, and crypto random UUID could spit out something that starts with a number. If there's no items, so if this string comes back with nothing in it, if no headings were found, we're going to return. We're not going to inject anything. If it works, we'll return true. And that becomes relevant for the debugging, because I'm checking to make sure that render was truthy. And if it's not, we're going to throw a debug error. Real quick, before we get into that, I just want to talk about custom events in general. So with my web components, I really like to use custom events as a way to let developers extend things in ways I didn't plan. And I've been doing this since back in the traditional JavaScript library days. It's just a really nice way to customize things. I use an approach for naming that I call prefix kebab, where you've got the name of the library, then the name of the component, and then using kebab case for the type of event. So it's the Kelp library, the TOC component, the ready event. And it creates a nice predictable formula for finding events for things. In this case, it bubbles. So I'm going to emit it on the web component that initialized it, but it bubbles. So if you wanted to listen for a bunch of tables of contents, you could listen on the document. That's going to work too. There's really not much kind of the way of detail on this one because it's just a ready event. But you could do things like when the table of contents is ready, maybe you grab some other stuff, or you do something different on a page. Like now that there's a table of contents, I can add this other feature that I wouldn't before. Like I don't know. That's the beauty of this. I have no idea how people are going to use it, but I've given them a way to detect when things are ready so they can do additional stuff if they want to. Inside the DOM itself, like if we jump over and look at here, you can see that this table of contents has an isReady attribute on it. This isn't as useful here, but I've got this class in Kelp where I say hide until ready as an attribute. And if there's no isReady, the thing gets display none, so it's not shown. And then when isReady gets added to it, it becomes visible. So this is useful if you have some sort of component that's progressively enhanced, or it's using some HTML that's in it, but you don't want anything displayed until it's ready. So that's just a nice little hook there. Or maybe this has some like margin or padding on it, and you don't want that taking up space until it actually has content in it to display, right? So it just provides you with ways to handle that sort of thing. So that's that piece of it. The other big thing here is debugging. So a lot of libraries will allow you to flag on debug mode, right? So you'll have debug on when you're in development, and you'll turn it off when you're in production because you don't want a bunch of console errors clogging up the console in a production environment if things go wrong. That works because tools like, say, Vue or React have a build step. And Kelp is very specifically built with one of its core operating principles is no build step. Like I want you to be able to use this thing without ever having to touch a build. I want you to be able to grab the code, load just what you want, and customize it with plain old CSS and HTML, and never have to like load up a terminal, run npm install, configure some files, and then run a build. Like I don't want you to ever have to deal with that. And so what I ended up doing for my debugging is I am emitting a custom Kelp debug event that includes details about the project, or about the error. So it bubbles. You pass in a detail, some information about what the error was, and it gets included as the detail property on the custom event. And you can see here, if the render fails for some reason, the only reason that would really happen is if there was no headings that matched the settings. So I say no matching headings found, and that gets emitted. And we can actually see that in action. So if we jump over here, I've got my Kelp TOC element. I've got no headings on this page that match the default of H2. And I've got a Kelp debug event listener set up. I am logging the event target. That's the element it was emitted on, and the event detail. So information about the bug. And if I were to jump over to the browser, I've got my no headings page here. And you can see that in the console, we get the element itself, which we actually can't see in the DOM because it's got no elements in it, but that's the one. And I've got my no matching headings were found error. And so what this allows you to do is when you're in development mode, in whatever tool you're using for that, your CMS, whatever, you could have a setting in WordPress, you could have a config in your static site generator for local hosted versus this is in production, like Hugo, which I use. If I run my local development command to spin that up, it uses a different config file than it does on the server, right? So whatever your setup is, you can listen for those events and log them. So I am now getting meaningful warnings, but I don't have to run some build step that has that command in there to turn on or off debug mode. It's just something that I can hard code in if needed, and I don't have to if not. So that was a really nice one. I like the way that all shaped up. And then the last piece here, this actually, someone opened an issue on GitHub for this and helped me kind of work through the different pros and cons of different approaches. So I recommend loading DOM manipulation JavaScript in the footer always. But sometimes people load it in the head. And when you do that, you run into a weird situation. So let me show you here. Let's cut this out and we'll just run this init without the current code. So if I jump over to, this says debug, but that's not right. Let's actually, so we know, yeah, load in the head. There we go. Cool. So you'll notice that the table of contents doesn't get generated, even though it should, because all the stuff is here that you would need. So what ends up happening is the code is already instantiated in the header. As soon as this table of contents component gets seen, it runs as the browser is rendering the document. But when this is found in the DOM, none of these headings exist yet. So it goes looking for elements that haven't been rendered in the DOM and therefore don't exist. And actually here, I should have debug mode on in here because that would make it easier to understand what's going on. So no matching headings were found, which is weird. Now you can get around this by doing things like if I add defer, it works. If I were loading this on a server and I had type equals module, it works. But as one of my friends pointed out recently, a lot of folks just don't have control over that. Like they might be working in an environment, a CMS, where they don't have control. I can't remember if it's like Wix or Squarespace or one of those, but they actually let you load custom JavaScript, but it always loads in the header. Like you have no control over how that works. And so what we're doing in Kelp now is I am basically, it's like an old school, if you remember like jQuery ready, where it would wait for the DOM to be ready before it would run code. I'm doing that. Excuse me. So we're checking to see if the document ready state is loading. If it's not loading, that means it's done. We will run the init function immediately. If that's not the case, like if it is loading for some reason, we set up, and I did not mean to do that, we set up an event listener for DOM content loaded. When it runs, we run this init function, and we only need to do that once. Like once the DOM content is loaded, we're all set. We can remove the event listener. It doesn't have to keep floating around there. So I'm using the once true property in that optional third argument on add event listener. So I mean, that's the whole trick there. And once we add that, our web component starts working the way you would expect it to again. Now, this is how I have this set up just for this demo. I'm going to make sure I drop all of this down in the description for you so you can download all of the source code. But in Kelp itself right now, because I am using these patterns over and over again, I actually have them set up as native ES modules. And I'm going to show you that in just a sec. All right, so over in my actual file, the ones I'm loading in Kelp, you can see I've got these imports now, ready, emit, and debug, and I am importing those in. If we look at those, it is all of that code we just looked at abstracted into some reusable functions. So I've got a ready function that checks if the document is ready and then runs the init function, but I'm accepting an instance as an argument to run that function on. Over in my emit function, I'm accepting the element, the component name, the ID of the event and any detail as arguments. And I'm creating my custom event following the Kelp component ID pattern, the prefix kebab, and emitting my custom event on whatever that element was. The debug event, same thing. I'm accepting the element and the error details as arguments, and I'm emitting them on the element with the Kelp debug custom attribute name. And then over in my component, instead of doing what I'm doing here, I run the ready event and pass in this, the current instance, as my argument. When the render fails, instead of running this debug, I run debug, pass in this, and my error function. Same with emit. Rather than just running this emit, I run emit and pass in this, TOC, and ready as my arguments. This makes it a lot easier to standardize the way this works across all of the different web components. Now, one of the challenges with this is if you're using native ES modules, you have to be running a live server for them to work. So you can't, if you're trying to test this locally, it kind of forces you to use dev tools or spin up some sort of local server with like a GUI app or something like that. In the long run, I don't want folks to have to do that. So where I've settled out with this, what's going to end up happening is Kelp will have a build step under the hood that it uses. So when I go to release code, I will run a build. But when you as a developer go to use it, you won't have to use a build at all. So like my build step will concatenate all the files into one and kind of pull in all the imports and wrap it in an IFI, an immediately invoked function expression. But everything will be unminified, so you can view source just like you've always been able to. You can copy, paste, delete stuff however you want. I'm going to include both versions, the raw and the built out version, so you can work with whatever one you want. They'll both be in the same directory. They will both be pushed up to the CDN. Like I know a lot of libraries only push their built files out to CDNs and not the unbuilt ones. I'm going to do both because I want you to have options, but I also don't want you to have to rely on a local server to test this locally. For now in beta, you do. I haven't gotten that set up. It's going to use ES build, which runs crazy fast and works really, really well, but we're just not there yet. So anyways, I've talked enough. I want to make sure all of this stuff ends up down in the description where you can download it, dig through it at your leisure. I'll also include a link to the Kelp source code. You can find that all on GitHub. It's all in the open. I'm building this project in the open. I want everybody to see it and learn from it and help make it better. I'm going to cover more videos on how all of this stuff works in the future. If you'd like to see more videos like this, if you have any topics about anything web development, but Kelp specifically, I'd love to hear about. Like if you start poking around, you have questions, leave comments down below. Let me know because it helps me know what videos to make more of in the future, and also lets YouTube know that you like this and you want more of it. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of it, if you want to help Kelp keep going, please consider Go Make Things membership. For just $3 a month, you get a whole ton of like really awesome stuff. You get access to my Discord community, which I think is worth the price of admission alone. But you also get access to my personal library of just like quick reference guides, courses. Every course I've ever created in the past is in here. Just a ton of cool stuff. I hope you do it not for the stuff. Like I hope you do it because you appreciate all the stuff I put out there for free. But if you need a little extra incentive, there's some cool perks too. Again, no pressure. Like times are tough right now. So if you don't have the budget for it, please don't feel guilty. Watch these videos, enjoy my free stuff. That's why I put it out there. The web is for everyone. I believe that with my whole heart. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. And I'm going to shut up now because I'm going to keep rambling if I don't. Cheers.